Bingo Blitz rules.
If your bingo has ads in it,
That's not a bingo.
if it doesn't have the coolest tournaments, mini games, and the most breathtaking design,
Nope, not a bingo.
if your bingo moment makes you feel so excited that you just want to burst in joy and scream out loud, bingo! Sorry, so you're playing...
Bingo Blitz? Now that's a bingo. Go for a world of excitement with Bingo Blitz, the #1 free bingo game. Download Bingo Blitz and play for free.
Now that's a bingo.
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
Let's hang out. Let's hang out. And let's talk about what lessons are found. Let's hang out. And let's listen to 2 lesbians shout. Let's hang out. Let's hang out.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Hang Out, the podcast that really wants to know who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
Will you ever run out of songs to do for the intro?
No, never. I will not, nor will I apparently run out of Hamilton references for us this season.
Ever.
From the West Coast, I'm Lee Holmes Foster.
And from the East Coast, I'm Ellie Brigida. To those of you who have been with us through this whole journey, thank you as always for listening. If you're a new listener, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Here's what's happening this week.
This week in the Lesdom.
You may remember our interview with Laurel's founder Melanie Crystal from a few weeks back. We're here to tell you even more about Laurel's because we love supporting queer-owned and women-owned businesses, and we especially love Melanie and Laurel's.
Laurel's are silky, stretchy, black latex panties for oral sex, rimming, and fingering. They're ultra thin, 10 times thinner than normal undies, so you feel everything, but they give you just a bit of coverage anytime you want it.
We know Valentine's Day is coming up, and there's no better time to try out Laurel's. Maybe you're curious or excited about latex and you want to explore with some sexy, kinky, rippable lingerie.
Maybe you're on your period and didn't want to worry about mess. Plus, you can go back and forth between back and front pleasure because Laurel's block bacteria transfer.
Maybe you want some anal rimming, but you'd like a little bit of a barrier.
Maybe someone has stubble on their face or their body and you want to avoid the scruff.
Maybe you're feeling a little sensitive or experiencing sensory issues.
Maybe any type of oral makes you feel too exposed and you just want a bit of coverage.
Maybe you're new to going down on a vulva and you just want to explore at your own pace.
Whatever the reason, the world's first oral sex panties, aka Laurel's, give you the power to love oral always.
They come in packs of 4 and their packaging is absolutely gorgeous. Plus, each pair of Laurel's is individually wrapped in these super cute pink pouches, so a sexy scavenger hunt is easy to plan out.
Ooh, I want a sexy scavenger hunt. Let's do it. They come in 2 styles, shorties for fuller coverage or bikinis if you want to bear a bit more.
Couples, thruples, hookups, spouses, cis, trans, queer, kinky, Laurel's are made to help everyone say yes to maximizing pleasure.
For listeners of our show, Laurel's is giving 15% off your first purchase today at www.mylaurels.com. That's www.mylaurals.com using the code HANGOUT.
So remember, if you're listening to the show and you want to try out Laurel's, you can get 15% off your purchase right now at www.mylaurals.com using the code HANGOUT.
Enjoy your Laurels, babies.
Let's hang out.
This Week in the Lesdom is a place where we can touch base each episode about things going on with the podcast or otherwise. We are still in our Season 5 Patreon campaign. We have made our first goal, and we'll be announcing when we're going to do our patron-only Q&A episode on our Patreon. We also want to thank our newest patron, Tamara. Thank you so much for joining. We can't wait to see more of you there. If you want to join, you can do that at bit.ly/lespatreon.
We have our next watch party coming up soon for Dickinson. That's going to be on February 6th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, so don't miss that.
Cannot wait. We're going to try to watch probably like 2 episodes.
Yeah,
Keep it.
yeah. We'll pick some good ones.
We'll pick the best ones. Don't worry. Yeah, we're not going to pick any episodes that don't have Sue and Emily in it. Don't worry. It's going to be great.
And as a reminder, some of you have seen on our socials, and so many of you have already reached out, and I'm not going to lie, I get like a little emotional every time someone does, but we are putting together a crowdfunding team to help us crowdfund for our next musical podcast, which is called Journey to the Heart. So if you are interested in helping, whether you want to donate to the crowdfunding or not, it is still super helpful to us to just have a team that's going to help us raise the funds for this. So you can send us an email at letshangoutpod@gmail.com. And please just know that we will be getting back to you. First of all, we know a lot of people have reached out and we haven't had a chance to get back to everyone yet because we don't have all the details or anything, but we've read them all and we are just very touched every time people are so excited to help us make the next one. And it's a lot.
I know. It's amazing. We're going to have a huge team and I can't wait.
It's going to be great.
In the Greater Less universe, I know that this movie came out a little bit ago, but Lee and I have both watched Encanto. I'm on the Encanto train, obsessed with it, and it's definitely in the running for Should Have Been Gay because many characters, and also the actor who plays Luisa is also gay, right?
Seems to be queer in some way. Posted a TikTok that very heavily indicates some flavor of queerness.
Which we are very happy about.
So listen, I know there is some controversy surrounding that. We will, if we decide to do an episode, please know we will be aware of all of that and talk about it. But we had to at least mention it because if we don't talk about Bruno, we have to at least talk about Encanto.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Also, in the Greater Less universe, I know that since Dancing with the Stars ended, everyone has just been
waiting.
Sadly just depressed, waiting around for me to talk about Jojo Siwa again. So have no fear, everyone.
Jojo Siwa is here.
Can you imagine? Oh my God. No, Jojo Siwa posted a really, really sweet Instagram post on the 1-year anniversary of when she came out last year. And listen, I just have to say, there is nothing that makes Ellie and I happier than watching someone live their best gay life. And that is what Jojo Siwa is doing, and that is what her message is basically to all of the many, many young people who look up to her, and I just think that's incredible. That's just incredible to me. I just love someone who is like, wow, I have a gigantic following of young people who deserve to see someone living their best gay life. And I'm like, yes.
And we are here.
Yes, they do.
We are here for JoJo living her best gay life.
Love it. We love to see it. It just makes me happy. And so I just wanted everyone to know about it. You're welcome for some more JoJo Siwa content.
Happy anniversary, JoJo.
Happy anniversary.
There's been people, I just love queer actors. I mean, Lady Gaga is queer. Lady Gaga and Salma Hayek were both in the House of Gucci, and they are on this press tour, and Lady Gaga has been just like saying the best shit because she's Lady Gaga. And so she's like, oh yeah, me and Salma, we're just working off of each other's energies. And I was like, you know what if we hooked up here? Like, what if we just like cross this barrier and like have like, it gets pretty hot and steamy. And everyone starts laughing. And Salma Hayek's like, no, she's not kidding. And so there's all this speculation going around that there was an actual gay scene that they filmed on tape with Lady Gaga and Salma Hayek that somehow made it onto the cutting room floor. But thank you, Lady Gaga, for bringing that to light for us. So we at least can imagine it. We know that
Ellie,
it exists somewhere.
Is it time to revive our
release the kiss.
Release the kiss?
Release the kiss, Gaga.
We still got the shirts.
Yes.
They're there.
Honestly,
they're ready and waiting. Release the scene.
Not
House
a
of
bad
Gucci.
idea.
Give it to us. We also want to call out that the DC Extended Universe just announced the casting for Alicia Yeoh, who's going to be played by Ivory Aquino, who will be the first trans character played by a trans actress in the DC Extended Universe. So listen, we love to see it in the Batgirl movie.
Oh,
yeah.
Batgirl.
Oh,
heck yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in for that. That's what's happening this week. Back to you, Ellie and Lee.
Thanks, Ellie and Lee. We are so excited to bring you episode 11 of season 5. This is Who Tells Our Story, and we are even more excited to be joined by a special guest tonight. We have Mariko Tamaki, who is a Canadian writer of comics and prose who writes comic books for Boom Studios, Marvel, DC Comics. She's the co-creator of the New York Times bestseller This One Summer, just launched a new LGBTQ plus graphic novel imprint with Abrams, and also has a new book, Cold, coming out pretty soon in February, which is a haunting YA novel about a shocking crime in a quiet town and 4 students who knew too much and said too little. Look at all of that.
We're so excited to have you here. Hey, Mariko.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Mariko, doing all of the things. Look at all those things.
Yeah, well, it's like a working artist thing. I feel like as soon as you talk to any, like if you are an artist for a living, you have to do more than one. I don't know any artists for a living who just do one job. I don't think it's possible.
Yep. Well, it's very, very impressive. Very impressive.
Thank you.
And we're very excited to talk to you today. Like Lee said, we want to talk to you about telling our own stories because as LGBTQ people, a lot of other people tell our stories for us, or we hold our stories in for a very long time until we finally tell them, right? And especially with your book Cold, we found that was like a recurring theme, right? It was none of you have read it yet, but you will.
we're gonna keep
and
it
we'll
like
try
no
to keep it spoiler
Yeah, no
free.
spoilers. All right, no spoilers.
But the format of it, right, is that it is told from the perspective of multiple people telling different stories of the same events,
Yes.
right? So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. Like, what was the inspiration to have that style of writing for Cold?
Well, the inspiration was that I tried it multiple ways. So I knew I wanted to write a murder mystery, and I knew who I wanted the sort of murder mystery to be about in terms of who I knew the victim of the crime was going to be, which is this teenage boy named Todd, who is like one of the few gay kids at his school. But as I sort of worked through, it just started to feel very procedural, and it started to feel like it was sort of automatically about the sort of outside in people looking at the life of this boy and trying to figure out the life of this boy. And then when I sort of went into the experience of this boy who's been dealing with, like amongst many other things, he's been dealing with like a lot of bullying at various levels throughout his high school life. He's been dealing with this bullying because it's so much about sort of tracking the events that lead to this kind of this tragic end for this one character. It just started to feel like I was kind of creating this kind of doomed path for this one character. And I just thought I wanted to sort of expand it. I wanted to sort of look at the sort of multiple queer lives that are going on, to sort of make it be that it's not just this sort of like, it's not set in stone that because you go through A, that you're going to do B. So I wanted to have another character who has some perspective that's queer perspective on what's happened to this boy who's been murdered, and to show sort of multiple takes on how to deal with what it means to be like an outcast, or what it means to be an outsider, what it means to deal like with bullying in high school. And I think especially because it's a book for young readers, I don't think that there is a like moral obligation that any writer has, even if they have a younger audience, to present like, I think that there's a version of it that says you have to give younger readers kind of a guide, or you have to give them a certain kind of message about what it means to be queer, or like sort of what the good thing to do is in any situation. Like I was aware of a younger audience, and so I wanted to present a broader field of the what ifs and what could be's of this situation.
Well, and I love that too, because it is funny, like when you think about kind of murder mystery stories as a whole, right? Like that's sort of the whole premise of it, is an incredibly simple story, usually like a very simple event that happened. And it's like, if you just tell the story of the event, like that's not a story.
Right.
It's like the unraveling and like peeling back all of these layers of the story that are really like, that's where the whole meat of the story is, and like stepping your way back into like what actually happened. But it is interesting to get to do that from the two different perspectives, like from George's perspective of sort of figuring out what happened. And you do get the detective, like the murder investigation, like the investigation into Todd's death, but that piece of it you get mostly from Todd's ghost, as opposed to like told from the perspective of like one of the detectives and their notes and their things and so it's like it's a different kind of spin on it. And for me, like I super enjoyed because we can talk a little bit about the like having that be the story of this character in the book, but I just really liked getting to have all of that unfold from the perspective of that gay kid who died, like you're still getting his voice telling it.
Sometimes, like one of the detectives investigating is also queer. And sometimes I feel like when you're just like making, you're like, there's always this kind of moment where you're like, is everybody gay in this? Am I just making everybody gay? I mean, that's really one of the things first of all, it's one of the things that's missing from so many representations is like you have like a queer character who's included in an otherwise straight world, as opposed to understanding that that these things are about communities. Like in this case, I feel like this is a community of high school students, which are these kind of artificial communities you're kind of forced into. But I wanted it to be that there was the sort of misperceptions of things were across the board. It wasn't just that straight people didn't understand, what this kid's life was like. It was that you're presented with whatever evidence you have, you're presented with whatever story you have, and you add that into that, whatever you're kind of looking for, and then you find sort of some version of that. A lot of the characters in this book kind of make a choice about how they're going to interpret a person based on what they already know or based on what they want to be true. For me, the character of Georgia, who's the female voice in this book, is kind of the one person who, because she's been given so many versions of stories that are sort of simplified, because her mother's a children's book writer, so her mother has used her life to tell sort of various stories about like kids are okay. So she has kind of a built-in hesitancy around believing anything that feels too good to be true. So she's one of the few characters who really doesn't have anything to believe. And so she's able to just sort of like take in what she sees as opposed to sort of like be guided by what she's expecting to find.
Yeah, I like that too. But I mean, also, it's like it is an interesting thing too. Like when we're talking, like, because Georgia, yes, is like taking it in everything, but there's also this like obsession with CSI and stuff like that, right? So I felt like there's like there is this like interesting play where I think I read this on like Facebook or something. Who knows? But someone was saying like it's so interesting that like women are obsessed with like CSI or SVU and stuff
Yeah.
when
I think
we're so
Saturday Night
often
Live did like a
like, we're
sketch
so
about it.
often the victims or something like that. I don't know, I'm like, are you a fan? Do you watch like, is that why you were, like,
I
doing all the
used
murder mystery
to.
stuff? You were like, "I'm so into this stuff."
Yeah, I used to fall asleep every night to Criminal Minds. That used to be my like going to bed show. And then I started having one day I was like, "Oh, I wonder if I dream about murder all the time because this is what I'm going to bed to." Like, it's
I
like,
mean, who could say if there's a clear connection
right?
between those two things? It's
Like
no
it
one will
was
know.
Law and Order or it was Criminal Minds were like the two things that were just on in like a, bunch of episodes would be on as I was going to sleep. I think the thing that I've stopped watching them, I mean, like this is going to sound super like of the moment, but I started listening to podcasts. I feel like one of the podcasts I listen to, I think it's called Into the Dark, like sort of more like sort of long views about looking at investigations. And ever since I started listening to those, I kind of can't watch Criminal Minds anymore. Because once you really look at what police work looks like on a sort of daily, like the sort of microcosm, it's not like, oh, we found a thumbprint. Hey, this guy has a thumb. Oh, awesome, it's him. Like that's just so. And I'm a writer of books. I'm in no way any person who holds any level of expertise about like police investigations. I only know what I have learned from podcasts. I'm like my parents that way. But it does seem to me to be like anything. It's like because I did graduate studies, and I feel like as soon as you go into like any kind of graduate work, it's all about breaking down the assumptions you've had about any kind of story about. It's like, anytime you hear a story about like, oh, the study was done and it proves this, as opposed to, oh, the study was done and it proves this tiny thing. It proves that this is true about this group of people at this time. This sort of like, oh, we want to believe these bigger things. We want to believe in simplicity, but like the more you read about anything, the more you see like, oh, it's just so incredibly tedious and complicated. And so I didn't want to completely just be like, police work is much harder than people think it is, or, like not police work, but like detective work is much harder. But I wanted to look at the kind of, to sort of look at some blind spots, basically. I feel like I always want to put like a little blurb at the front that's like, this is just fiction. This is just me this is me doing my best. So this is nothing to read and say like that you know anything about anything from reading this book.
We'll add that to the front of like every book ever written.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Just want a little like post-it from the author being like, I just tried my best over here.
Right. You did great. You did great.
You did
I do want to sort of like go back to another thing that you said earlier, which is like that there's like a lot of queer people in this world, right? To be fair, there's a lot of queer people in the world that we live in, right? And yet
we travel in packs,
yes,
damn it.
And yet we're constantly hearing queer stories through a straight lens. Like I think about like I keep seeing like trailers for different films. Like there's this trailer with Mark Wahlberg. Has anyone seen this? There's like this whole movie with Mark Wahlberg and like his son dies and his son is queer. But yeah, so the story is like not about the son really. Like they pretend like it's about the son, but really it's about Mark Wahlberg and Mark Wahlberg seeing the world through the lens of his son passing away and then like learning more about his son, right? And it's like I feel like they're constantly just worlds that are like full of straight people and then like one queer person and that's it. So like I love that there's like you said, there's so many queer characters, like the detective and also like his teacher as well. What informed that for you? Like why was that a choice that you made?
I mean, I think part of it is also that I came out in university and then from the time I came out, I feel like my community was queer. Like I had, you know, straight friends. I still have straight friends, but like just the majority of the people that are part of my world are queer people. And when I moved back to Toronto, where I'm from after university, and as an artist, basically, especially growing up in Toronto, there's a theater there called Buddies in Bad Times Theater, which is a queer space, queer theater. And so, like, all of me being an artist was about being a part of that world. And I feel like I just assumed that that was the population that we were writing to and about. And I think that I was very lucky in that a lot of my early work as an artist was like, especially, you know, growing up on like spoken word stages, it was like I was speaking directly to queer people. And so I never assumed that I had to write about anything else. Like I just assumed that it was just like that's what you did. And I think that it's just been my default. And I'm like it's funny because I think now I have to like make a conscious decision to make a character straight. And I think that
you're like, I've heard rumors of straight people
like,
in stories.
She could be straight. Like, I think the same way, you know, like whenever people sort of count it as a decision, I think if you grow up in a straight world and you are straight and you assume everybody else in the world around you is straight, then you make that decision. And I've just made, you know, I don't like to think of it as the opposite decision. It's just, it's my world and it's my experience and the people that I came up with and the artists that I came up with. And I grew up with queer writers. And as an artist, like that was who was kind of, you know, forming my perspective. And so I think it's been kind of a privilege to be able to do that. And I guess like I've thought sometimes about sort of not doing that. It's like although like one time I was doing this Q&A and we were talking about unpopular people and I was saying I mostly write about unpopular people, like outsider people. And some girl at the front of the stage was like, "Who's going to tell the stories of popular people?" And I was like
if you want to write it, you can.
Yeah, I was like, that's such a, you know, it's like, what about the popular people? I was like, wow, that's like a really weird campaign to like, you know, like I don't even know what that flag looks like if you're a popular people flag, but like I do think that is
justice for the popular kids.
Well, and that's why, you know, to me, it's so much a story of access, right? It's really, to me, the argument is really about making more space and putting more resources behind queer people who want to tell their stories, as opposed to like including queer people in the stories of straight people. Like I do think, I think it's great to have my friend Zoe Whittle, I think, had a quote about like the kind of oddity of the sort of like the Riverdale queer character whose best friends were all straight people. And her point was like most queer people have a lot of queer friends. Like they don't all like, you know, just want to hang out with straight women all the time. Yeah. Although some do. And, you know, that's cool if that's what you want to do. But like, I think it's just about being included in someone else's reality as opposed to making space for like a different perspective.
Oh my god, I have like so many things that I want to talk about right now.
I saw you, Lee, just like bursting to
My
the
brain is like a
seams of,
million
like,
miles a
yeah.
minute. I can't keep up with
I'm
it.
like, wait, what? Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna start with the one that you just said though. That is so because I feel like it's exactly the same thing you were just saying, Ellie, with like the Mark Wahlberg movie. Is it's like that's not a queer movie. That's not a movie about a queer person. That's not like that is pitching to straight audiences like, hey, look, a dead queer character that we can like learn about and grow for ourselves in the process. Like, meh.
Yes.
We don't need that, you know? And it's why I think there's something like Cold is interesting because I think at like a surface level, if you hand people a book and be like, it's about a gay kid who dies, like that's
Right.
what you expect you're gonna get. Right? Like you expect you're gonna get that story of like, oh, maybe they'll uncover that he was gay and then you'll get to see his parents like struggle with that or like have known but have been ashamed of him and how does that make them feel about themselves, you know, like that's the story that I feel like we've all seen time and time again and like nobody needs it anymore, you know, but that's not what Cold. And it's so it's so fun to get to see the story unfold where like you do have so many different perspectives and so many of them are queer, including the queer perspective of the queer kid who died, you know, like there's just like so many layers that go into I love that. And I also cuz I love that like it touches on this idea as well of like something that we've talked about in the past where like there's a lot of like everybody knows bury your gays and knows the trope and is like
Right.
tired of the trope
Sure.
and tired of like gay characters dying and like
Yeah.
and then you get into this like weedy middle ground area of like but also sometimes like we're gonna have characters that die in our stories, like that's a legitimate thing and a narrative that and a tool and like you can't just never kill a character. And also if you're writing, you know, like you just said, if I'm writing stories that center numerous queer characters, like does that mean you're just never allowed to have a character die? Like how does that where does that leave you, you know?
I mean, I think it's also like, yeah, like there's tropes, right? Like, and I think the thing is that if the trope is all you get, if the only way you're going to get a queer character in a story is if he's a tragic reminder of like,
Right.
you know, the inhumaneness of man or what have you, then that's our, you know, the in-personness of persons. Like, then it's not good. But I also think it's like, I mean, like the more stories you have, the more we can kind of like I don't think that there's anything wrong with certain tropes. Like I personally, I'm not a big fan of coming out stories now. That's just me. It's because I grew up in an age of like cheesy lesbian coming out movies. You know, Claire of the Moon was like my gateway into lesbianism. So I'm just coming back from that. Like I'm still trying to like grapple with that part of my life. But I don't think there's anything wrong with them. And that is a super important part of a lot of queer people's lives. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people have that moment of like realizing that thing about themselves. And it's a perfectly good story. It's just because it was so much a part of all I could read. That's just, I'm not interested personally in it anymore. But I think it's like, that like I want there to be multiple versions of that. I want there to be like a coming out story that I've never heard before. Like I want there to be more of those stories so that it's not just like the only gay stories you get are a gay person saying to a straight person, you don't understand what it's like to be me. You know what I mean? Like I want to see
Yeah.
different versions of things. Like it's funny because I just watched Sort of which is this amazing show on HBO Max. And it's just got this incredible combination of like, there's so many different queer characters. There's so many different versions of like what it means to be a queer person in like today that there is like elements of sort of, you know, having to come out, but it's so much tempered by the specificness of like all of these stories coming together. Yeah, it's like one of the few sort of scenes like that I've seen recently that I've really enjoyed because I feel
Yeah.
like it feels so like a lot of coming out stories feel very retro to me, especially if they're like in movies where it's like set in the 1800s or whatever. Which seems to be-
Well, yeah, that is
go
like
ahead,
the
Ellie, go ahead.
definition
But
of retro. No,
listen, I am like
that's
the
one of
only
the tropes that
person-
I'm over.
I'm
Like,
the only
as you're
person I
over
know.
coming out, yeah, I can't
Yeah.
do the 1800s
I watched
ones.
Ammonite. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
so
but
alone in that.
and it's funny because it's like there are like Ellie, you hate them, but like Jana can't get enough of them.
Yeah,
you
my
know?
girlfriend's like obsessed with these period pieces, so I'm like the only like I have to be like, she's like, do you want to watch this? I'm like, I'll watch it with you, but like I
I'll
don't
watch it,
want
yeah.
to.
but that's what I love about it is it's like there's all like tropes are they will always be, you know, like they're gonna be what they are, but I feel like there's something that's fun about having there be like everyone's at a different place with them. You know, like everyone's gonna be at their own place in terms of like what's the trope that I'm just like I can't do it anymore. I'm just like you know, like not even like a queer trope, but I feel like we hit a space at one point where like my wife and I kind of did the same thing where I was like I just can't watch another show that's like just about high schoolers. Like I can't. Like we're in our 30s. Like I just want to watch something else. Like it's nothing against them. They're great shows. Glad people like them. I'm just like it's not what I'm here for right now. But I also love the idea of like when you can see sometimes how even like what should be a trope is still different when it's like when there's a queer person telling that story, you know? Because that's when you don't get the Mark Wahlberg story. That's when you get like a nuanced, real queer story in which like a queer character can die, and that's not the moral messaging of it, you know? Like that's not the takeaway. That's not like they're not queer to have died in the story, I guess. Do you know what I mean?
I took it. I mean, I think this book took me a really long time to write, and part of it was because I was my first murder mystery, but part of it was because I took very seriously the fact that I was killing a gay character, and that I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything about it that was romanticized or that was, you know, truly didn't want to leave anybody with a message that there was like a tragic so we can learn the lesson of like we need to be loving to everybody, that there was something more that I had to say about it. And I think like I do think that there is a weight on queer writers writing about their experiences. On the one hand, it's like the weight of just like your own of trying to be like true to your own experiences, but there is also I think the weight of your community and your desire to not put anything else into the world that feels like it's just repeating the same story that feels like a story that's kind of like restricted people as opposed to sort of like, you know, open people up to more experiences. Maybe that's putting a ton of pressure on. But I feel like it is a pressure.
But
like,
it is.
for me, that's always been like, I mean, part of it is also that I grew up, you know, like reading my pieces to like an audience. And then you like walk out into the audience and people tell you what they think immediately. So having that feedback has definitely been a part of me growing up as an artist.
How is that feedback for you now? Because like you're not going to be sharing everything publicly before it's printed, right? How is that different?
I mean, I think part of being a public person is that you have to, I mean, the first time that I understood, this one summer was the first book that I ever wrote that I truly understood that more people than just my friends were going to read it. Like it was like my first sense of like, we had a book launch for it in Toronto. And I was like, when we got there, I was like, I don't know anybody here. I was like, that's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, before that, it was just like my community. And I was like, oh, this is going outside of that. So I'm not really sure how that works. It's like even people interpreting your work and interpreting the meaning of what you were going to say or what you've said in a book mine is a trip. I think you have to decide as an artist whose opinion really matters to you and who you like really like who you trust for their feedback. And I get that feedback. I have like a pretty close knit group of people who have very solid opinions that they're perfectly willing to share with me, even if they're not liking what I'm doing. So I have that group of people, and I feel like I have my editors, I have like the sort of that. And I think beyond that, I think it's very hard to be ruled by other people's evaluations. Like, I don't ever go on Goodreads. Let's put it that way. I don't go on Goodreads.
Good. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
please don't.
Yeah.
That seems to be the resounding message
Well,
of every writer we know.
And I think that there's nothing, I mean, I think it's super valid. And I know that there's lots of people who depend on it. And there's people who use that as like their input for like the books that they pick. And there's, like, I think being a reader and a critical reader and putting your opinion and putting your critique out there is like super important. I just don't necessarily find it helpful for me to take that on.
It's a lot to maintain like your own mental health with all of those voices going on.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, exactly.
Understandable.
I feel
Yeah.
like, I think especially once I started working in comics, I was like, oh wow, this is a lot. This is a lot of people who want to let me know what they think about this thing.
I'm like, can I ask you which comics have you worked on and like which ones had the most discussion behind them?
I mean, they all do. I worked for Marvel and I worked for DC Comics over the past like 5 or 6 years. And so the thing I'm writing now is the detective series for Batman. There are people who have been a fan of that book since it's like the thing that they grew up with. And it means something to them. Like, they're part of a much longer story. And I'm a very small part of that. Yeah, all fans are intense. In a way that
Yes.
is just like, I love fandom too. Look, it used to be a very uncool thing to be a fan of something. And so I think, I certainly grew up with things that meant the world to me. For me, it was just a much more private thing, right? Like for me, my fandom is like me and my laptop, like alone. It's not like sharing, but I also think that it's been like a life raft for people too. So I have like all the respect in the world for that.
Yeah, we are like very, very many of our listeners are big on fandom.
yeah.
I'm like, we are definitely big on fandom here, but like doing our best to keep that fandom non-toxic, like having that place.
We frequently choose our words very carefully.
Yeah, be a place where people feel supported by like feel like you can share your love of something with other people who also love it. Like that's an exciting.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And as we head into Thanksgiving time, I want to start by thanking my wife, Kelsey, who has not only listened to just about every episode of this podcast for 8 seasons now, but who also is the only reason I'm able to make time to record it every week. She takes the kids, gets them dinner, and gets them ready for bed just so that Ellie and I can come on and yell about gay things into each other's faces for an hour. So here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people you're grateful for in your life, including yourself. I've been in therapy for a long time now, and one thing that's so important about therapy is how it teaches you to be more intentional. And being intentional about gratitude and how to show that to the people you appreciate is just one of the many benefits that I've gotten from therapy over the years. If you've been thinking of starting therapy, consider giving BetterHelp a try. I know how hard it can be to find time for regular therapy, and BetterHelp is designed to be flexible and convenient for your schedule. You can fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. If you want to start being more intentional about gratitude in your life, visit betterhelp.com/leshangout today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/leshangout.
Let's hang out.
For many businesses, the holiday season can be both an exciting and stressful time. With so many balls in the air, one thing you definitely want to know you can rely on is how you're selling your products. And with Shopify, you can rest easy knowing it's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And when it comes to successful brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, an often overlooked secret is all the things that go on behind the scenes that make selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, if you take a peek behind that curtain, you'll see that Shopify is what makes it all possible. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, so that's more happy customers and way more sales going. It's true all the time, but especially this time of year, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use for Realm merch with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm. For many businesses, the holiday season can be both an exciting and stressful time. With so many balls in the air, one thing you definitely want to know you can rely on is how you're selling your products. And with Shopify, you can rest easy knowing it's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And when it comes to successful brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, an often overlooked secret is all the things that go on behind the scenes that make selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, if you take a peek behind that curtain, you'll see that Shopify is what makes it all possible. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, so that's more happy customers and way more sales going. It's true all the time, but especially this time of year, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use for Realm merch with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Streaming December 12th on Peacock. Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie are back.
That's hot. Loves it.
For a show-stopping reunion that will prove putting on an opera is anything but simple.
We're really good at this.
One thing's for sure, they won't be upstaged.
Good to have you back. Come on, we've got a show to do.
Paris and Nicole, The Encore, a 3-part reunion special, streaming December 12th, only on Peacock.
Exciting part of fandom to me.
There's a queer Comic-Con, like a queer Comic-Con. FlameCon is amazing. And like it was a huge light bulb moment for me to go to that and see like queer cosplay. I'd never been in a room of just queer cosplay, and that like, you know, which to me is like all comics is fan fiction. I'm writing Batman, I'm writing a form of fan fiction, like 100%. And the evolution of these things comes from fans. Fans push things forward. Fans like, you know, it's the love of fans that keeps these things alive. And just seeing like people embodying this thing that makes them so happy in this queer way was just like, I was like, this is the best. Like, I was like, I am dramatically underdressed for this event, but I'm loving all of this. This is so cool.
Is FlameCon still going on? I mean, obviously, like conventions are not right now, but like, is that a thing
It's
that
still
might
going.
happen
I mean,
again?
I think it's still going.
Yeah, I mean, I think all cons are kind of on hold
yeah,
because
right?
they are literally massive indoor events of
Yeah.
people. Yeah, like I think it has to be safe to go. I'm holding off until it's safe to go.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm very excited to go back. Like to me, it's such a cool part of being a creator is to like I mean, on the one hand, I certainly don't want the work that I do to be dictated by like everyone's thoughts and opinions. On the other hand, to go and meet the people who love your work is just such a uniquely awesome part of being a writer.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to go to FlameCon if it ever comes
Oh my
back.
gosh,
Now I'm
it's
like, I need to
so
see
good.
this.
I always walk away with like a shirt. Like for me, it's like I always walk away with a shirt that people for like the rest of the year, like, where'd you get that shirt? And you're like, you can't have this shirt. I got this shirt at FlameCon. Like, they're like, what if I'm like, no, you have to go to FlameCon. It's probably not true, but I'm like, this
Yeah, I'm
shirt,
sure they sell them online, but
whole
the only
experience,
place. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
shirt. Yeah.
I love that. Speaking of being a creator and being a queer creator, we want to talk a little bit about the imprint that you're
Yes.
working on because like we're talking about Cold, but it's really also so cool that you are helping share other LGBTQ stories. So can you tell us a bit more about your imprint?
So Shirley Books is LGBTQ comics by LGBTQ creators, and we are an imprint of Abrams. Really, the whole idea was my girlfriend. So my girlfriend Heather Gold, who's also an artist and a comedian and really just amazing person, one day was like, "You should have." She was like, "All you talk about is like wanting to edit and helping make more comics." She was like, "Why don't you start an imprint?" And I was like, "Oh no, that sounds like a ton of work. Oof, let's not do that." But I had a really positive experience. I had worked on the Lumberjane series with Abrams because they did the prose version of the original comics. And so they were super into it. And they had this Afrofuturistic imprint already going with John Jennings. So I thought that that would be sort of like a good place for me to be. And basically it's kind of unique in that our agenda, our gay agenda, is that
I was waiting for you to say it. I was like,
don't give away the secrets. What if straight people
Yeah,
listen?
which is
They'll know
gay.
everything.
Yeah, what's your gay agenda? Usually it's breakfast. My gay agenda is like breakfast first.
Yeah.
But it's really creator focused. So we don't have any kind of, in terms of genre or in terms of like fiction, nonfiction, fantasy, like anything we want to do, we can kind of do. So it's very focused on that part of it. So our first book came out this year. It's called Lifetime Passes by Terry Blast with Claudia Aguirre. And it's kind of like Heather's meets Cocoon. I always say it's about these teenagers who are obsessed with this theme park. And then this one teenager finds out that she's not going to be able to afford her pass. But they find out that the theme park has this policy that if a member of your party dies while you're at the theme park, that you get lifetime passes. And this girl decides that she's going to use her aunt's. Her aunt works at like a senior center, so they start bringing seniors to the theme park with the hopes that somebody will
it's so
will take its
ridiculous
course.
and great.
It is ridiculous and great. And I think the thing is that Terry does such a great job of really bringing together like really kind of like wicked premises with really heartfelt stories. And it's really an incredible and I think rare like intergenerational story about people coming from a variety of different places where they need support and they need help and they just need something that feels safe. Like, it's like you want something that feels like home and they sort of find each other in the story. And it's really like, it's like a wicked premise, but then it's very like, like crying by the end of it kind of graphic novel.
Very
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
I also love because sorry to like quote yourself back at you, but but I read
There's a quote.
You said
Let me read a quote from somebody.
I'm not gonna read the quote. I'm just saying like it's funny to be like I saw you said in this other interview, but you also mentioned that it's like it's mostly about highlighting queer writers, queer creators. But it doesn't have to be that, like, the stories themselves are, like, super queer-focused, too. And which I also love, like, in terms of how it kind of ties into, like, this theme that we're talking about. Because, we're talking about, like, telling our own stories and, like, our own voices and all that stuff. But, like, kind of like what you said before, like, you might have a lot of stories that, like, oh, I grew up surrounded by queer people and, like, my stories have tons of queer people in them. But, like, that's not every queer person's experience, and like we're allowed to tell stories with straight people in them too, and it's like it's still gonna be different and it's still gonna be like a different perspective and a different voice, and like that's still so important. So I don't know, I just love that you like called that out in our interview that I read about it, because I just think that's great.
What do queer stories look like? It's like you said, exactly, like I grew up in a community of queer people, so maybe my story looks very different than somebody who grew up or lives a life that they're mostly surrounded by straight people. What does a queer person in a story to look like? There are characters in Lifetime Passes that are queer, but that's not necessarily what the story itself is about. So, like there's a sort of self-identifying that has to happen in a lot of queer stories. You can be like, just so you know, this is a queer story. I'm going to tell this person that I'm queer, so you know that we can kind of move forward with that. As opposed to like a lot of interactions, and there's certainly a lot of stories for queer people in their lives that don't involve identifying yourself as a queer person as you move forward. And I think that is been kind of an interesting part of this, is that really because we're just focusing on the creators, it kind of opens us up to like what kinds of realities, what kinds of stories do you want to tell?
I would so much rather read a story about straight people written by a queer creator than read like an awful lot. Not like, I'm not gonna say all, because it's not all. I have read great queer stuff written by straight people,
Sure.
but like, a lot, a heavy amount of of queer stories written by straight people tend to lack something for a lot of us. They don't resonate always the same way, you know, like not like they never do or they can't, or like straight people aren't allowed to write queer characters. Like it's not, it's more nuanced than that, I guess, what I'm getting at, you know?
Well, and I think it's a really like one of my favorite writers, Timothy Finley, is a Canadian gay writer who's sadly no longer with us. But I mean, most of his stories were about straight characters. And I just, I don't think it made the writing any less queer, really. Like, I feel like queer writing is as much about a
Yeah.
perspective on things as it is about characters or sex or, gender in any given book. I mean, I think too, like, I'm trying to also think of a diplomatic way to say this. Like, I made a decision a while ago that I was like, I don't know how many more, like, I think, wary of stories about, especially like female characters that are written by men. Because I think it's like I've been burned a couple times by things where I feel like it's not for me that the story is being written. Not that stories have to be written for me,
Yep.
but like I think it is your choice as a consumer of art to say, I don't want to read these anymore. I'm not saying you can't make them, and they're certainly being made, but I personally don't want to see this perspective on this world. Like, I just don't. And in part, that's because I'm longing for different perspectives. Like, I'm longing for more BIPOC creators to get to tell their stories before I see another story of like a certain population talking about a certain population. Like, I just am not into it anymore. And I think that that's your choice as a consumer. Like, it's your choice about what you want to support. And I think it's really important for me as a queer creator to support other queer creators. Like, I am constantly kind of reviewing what it is that I'm reading because I think that there's some defaults that I have because of when I grew up and because of what like my canon was when I grew up. And I feel like every once in a while I have to sort of like ask myself why I'm only reading certain stories by certain people because I want to support more than that. And part of me doing that is by spending my money and my time on different creators.
Oh, there's definitely that component of it too. But I also like I let me quote you back at you some more. But this time from your book. Can I include like a quick quote from Cold? It's not spoilery. It's from the first chapter. But just because I love like and we started talking about this a little bit that like Georgia kind of talks about this experience of like her mom writing these kids books that are like based on her and her brother and hating them, you know, and I love like she has this quote that she says that I really liked that says, maybe I don't like this book because it's not me and yet somehow it's me, you know, and like I think that's like so much of what you're getting at too is like this idea of other people telling us our own stories, like whether that's men writing like women's stories, whether it's like, you know, straight people writing queer stories, whether it's white people writing BIPOC stories. Like it's never the case that like it's impossible for it to be good or it's impossible for it to be
like a good, you're just saying like a good piece of art
like,
or impactful.
Right.
But
like,
there's
it's
like a
not
there's
it's not that, and it's not that like it shouldn't be allowed or you shouldn't do it. It's just like I like kind of what I was saying is like I would just much rather like, especially where Ellie and I like we talk about this all the time, that I'm like I would just kind of much rather like consume queer media by queer people, like even if it's not about being queer, even if it's not like focused on like the whole point of this is like, a gay character surrounded by gay people. Like, I don't even need that. Even if it's just like, hey, I'd much rather support a queer creator telling a cool story that they want to tell. That's still like, there's so many different pieces that all kind of mix in together there, you know? Like, and that's why this was like the theme to me that I was like, this is what I want to dig into, because I think it's like it does get into this messy area where like people want to start using it to like draw lines in the sand and like gatekeep people out and like you can't write that book, you're bad for doing it, and you can't do this, and tropes are this, and you know, like just there's so much in there that I think is it's just more complicated than that. And like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have a point here. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah,
I do think it is.
I'm building to nothing.
No, but I think it is complicated, and I think it's worth thinking about. I think part of being a critical reader and a critical consumer is thinking about the choices that you're making and thinking about what the things that you're reading are sort of part of in terms of the larger picture, but also like part of in terms of your perspective and what it lends to. Like art is entertainment, and art is also for me something more than that. Like I want the books that I read to be things that are I mean, this is super cheesy, but like whatever. I feel like the books that I read are kind of a part of me, like, and I feel like it's a part of my artistic practice reading, and I feel like it's a part of who I am as an artist and who I am as a member of the queer community. And so like I feel like it's maybe possible to put like too much weight on what you're reading. Like, honestly, that I go to see every Marvel movie that comes out. Like, that's where my dollars are also going. But I also really love that Chloe Zhao was the director of one of the last Marvel movies, and I truly thought that her perspective I really felt the impact of her perspective on the movie that got made. Like, for me, part of being a cultural consumer is like a level of critique and disappointment and elation and all of these things, like, and I feel that in relation to queer creators in a different way than I feel it in relation to straight creators. Like I feel like it's an ongoing conversation. And I think that sometimes people find it really confrontational to say, like even for me to say, like, I don't want to read like straight men writing about teenage girls anymore. I'm just not interested in their hot take on that. And obviously I said hot take, so I'm being like judgmental. But like I feel like it's part of me when people take it as an insult, like want to say like, I take this really seriously too. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying this for you. I'm saying this for me and for what I want to be a part of my world and where like what art I want to see more of and all of these things. So I'm not being flippant and
Yeah. And I think it's something, the not being flippant, I think is something too that like most people who are also creating their own content, I think like aren't super flippant about, I mean, again, like I can't blanket statement, but like Ellie, like we've talked about this too, just in terms of like, like as we create our own stuff, like
that we're like a much more gracious towards other creators because you're just like, okay, yeah, like you are working really hard to put together. You're like, we know all the shit you are going through and doing. So like, yeah, I think it's just the same stuff that we've sort of been saying of like, you can make it good for you. Like, this sounds so sarcastic. I'm not trying to be. Congratulations, you made it. It's really not trying to be like that. But also, we don't have to consume it if it's not for us.
Right. And I also think it's like there's different worlds, It's like whenever I talk to my mom and what my mom is reading at any given time, she just loves the books that she loves. You know what I mean? She's not getting into it. She's not thinking about the same thing. She didn't have the same context. And, like it's funny because you go to like a different room and you sort of like talk about your concerns about what you're watching and what you're reading. And it is not the same as the people that you're talking to. But I also think that one of the great things about being the other, so, in terms of going to cons and stuff like that, is I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of different writers festivals and meeting other writers and sort of getting other writers' perspectives on things and talking to people who are, from their first novel to people who have been writing since the 60s or whatever. And I think it's always good to sort of get sort of different perspectives about like the thing that you think is like the most important thing in the world, and then talking to someone else and them having their most important thing in the world. And you're like, oh, they're different. Interesting.
Yeah, we have run into that because our newest projects over basically over the pandemic, because we released one and then we're working on our second right now, is we're working on queer rom-com podcast musicals, and we're like literally like how niche upon niche can you make that, just deeper and deeper to like a smaller and smaller pool of people who are like, yeah, that's my jam. And we're like, but it's our jam. So like that's what matters at the end of the day, you know, is like, what is your jam, and are you like focusing on that? Because someone out there is going to agree, and the people who don't, like, what are you going to do? You're not going to change their minds, you know?
And I think it's great also, like, my jam has evolved. Like, when I first started, when the pandemic started, my girlfriend and I got the Criterion Collection. I hate old movies. I'm not an old movie person. I was, like, down with old movies. And now I'm like, I only wanna watch old movies. Like, now I'm obsessed with, like, movie stars of long ago. Like, my current favorite actor is this man named William Powell, who is, like, long dead, and I am obsessed with him. So I feel like, that is the other thing too, is I feel like, you know, like, to me, you can read whatever you wanna read. Follow your sort of, like, heart on that one. But I also feel like it's a great thing to go outside of what you think is, like, art, or what you think is the things that you're going to like, and try something else. Like, to me, that's a kind of like, that's my version of, like, being an artist, is, like, trying to find other things. Like, I also say this as someone who watches at least 2 episodes of Great British Bake Off every day. Like,
Yes.
every time there's a new season, I'm like, "Woo, that's good," because I know all the lines by heart, so it's good to, like, expand by a couple episodes every once in a while. So I know what it means to just, like, wanna watch the same thing over and over again because it's relaxing. But I also think that, like, if you feel like you have a sense of queer art, and then you kind of step outside of your world a little bit, and then you see, like, oh, like, even going to another country and seeing, like, oh, this is not what I thought of as, like, these stories are so different.
Yeah, and what I love
That
now
sounds
too.
very, like, colonialist, sort of.
No,
Just that it's
no.
good to read other things. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, you've definitely been saying, like, just to, like, expanding your idea of, like, where you can find art and queer art and all kinds of stuff. But I also love too that, like, since all of the, like, coming out trope films and, like, all of the very, like, similar and far between queer media, there is this, like, expansive world of queer media, like, for people to discover. So, like, so that it's exciting to me that, like, you can say, "Hey, I literally never wanna watch something written by a straight man ever again," and you could find, like, enough content to keep watching.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very exciting to me.
Yeah, like, I've been able to go to, because, like, living in the East Bay, going to Frameline, and going to, see, I mean, and I grew up in Toronto, so I grew up going to, like, I got to see art that my friends were making, you know what I mean? And, like, that's, which is so different from what the mainstream is. So I feel like that's been, yeah, I always love to see something, like, I like the sort of rough edges of, like, also I kind of love the rough edges of, like, we just made this because we love it. Yeah, it's weird. This is not like like,
Yeah.
we made this movie. It's kind of
See,
weird.
I feel like that's my jam right now. My jam right now is just people making the, like, this is the thing that I am, like, desperately passionate to have exist out there. And, like, I just love it, especially if those people are queer. That's our jam right now. That's my jam, at least. I'm speaking for both of us, Ellie. We are a single unit.
Yes,
I mean, for me, that
valid.
was like, like, my introduction to comics was zines, right? Was like people who were just like, I'm going to make this magazine because I just broke up with my girlfriend and I want everyone to know about it. I have a photocopier. Like that was.
Were you also writing these zines?
I wasn't writing them about breakups per se, but I was the secretary for many, many years. And so
Amazing.
I made good use of the free photocopying that was available to me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. How far we have come. Now there's,
Oh.
like, now I feel like people are making zines, like, on Instagram. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're making, like, digital zines.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
But
thing. I think it's, I do think that there's an incredible advantage to people who are creating, like, things like comics now, because you can get your comic to 100,000 people without having to make 100,000 copies of it. Like, it's
Mhm.
really just like it's such an amazing thing to see. Like, I follow tons of people on Instagram who are just, like, putting out mini comics, and that has been that's been like, it's like the highlight of my day usually, reading those things.
I know I do love a good web comic. There's one.
Well, and
I forget what their name. I forget what their name is. I'm gonna find them and I'll tell you. But they were writing very like I don't even know how I stumbled across them. Probably from like #lesbian. Who knows? They were writing this super gay comic, and I was like, every single day they were releasing one. I was like, this is so impressive to be like every single day you're putting a new like story, and it was all building on the same story.
Joey Allison, who does things with the nib, is one of my favorites right now.
I'm looking him up and I'm gonna follow him.
Done. She is, yes, lady cartoonist, library worker, potato chip aficionado. Her comics are awesome.
There's like a lesbian ants one too. That one's funny.
Yeah,
that's like more of a meme one, but
I feel
like
I've grown into my lesbian ant identity. Like I feel like there was one day that I was walking just to like the CVS or something, and I caught sight of myself in the mirror, and I was like, "Whoa, I'm a lesbian ant right now." I was like, art teacher / lesbian ant. Like there was just so many layers happening, and like so many of them that I made myself. I was like, "Woo, this is strong. This vibe is very intense." And I took a photo of it and shared it, and everybody was like, "Yeah, that's it.
Embrace
That's
it.
what you are now." I was like, "Yeah."
Isn't that like all of our dreams? I have a lesbian aunt. She's, everyone knows her. So it's goals to be the lesbian
Hey,
aunt.
I've got the lesbian mom vibe going, and that is strong as well.
Yeah.
So listen.
I don't look like a lesbian mom. I don't look like someone who has I look like someone who is temporarily looking after somebody. Not permanent.
Nothing permanent.
Like I look like somebody who is going to feed somebody something that they shouldn't eat and then send that kid home so that the consequences can be felt by someone else.
Yeah, I've got the lesbian mom who has taken on the mantle of I am your dad now. I will make the dad jokes. Like this is, everybody's got to find their place. Got to find your role.
Mm-hmm.
Find that vibe.
Yeah, in the lesbian family hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
Wherever you could fit in there.
Are you the gay cousin? Are you the gay sister? It's like everyone has to cast themselves.
You know how they call a gay uncle a gunkle?
Yes.
What do they call lesbian aunts? Like
The
do we
lesbian?
have is that a thing?
I like that.
Lesbian? I like
Seems
that.
like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the thing with that is that it has to be self-identifying. I feel like you can suggest what someone else is, but that is up for them to accept or reject. You can't just say you're the gay uncle. If that person's like, no, I'm not, you're like, okay then.
Okay.
Yeah. They have to have bought a shirt that says gunkle on it and wear it to the holiday parties.
Yeah.
For you to be like, okay, yes.
What we're saying is you have to let people tell their own stories. Nailed the landing on that one.
Be your own story. Yes, exactly. Be your own story.
Be your own gunkle.
Crushed the dismount. Hooray.
Yes. Is it time for our Q and Gay then, Lee? Is that what we're leading into?
Let's do some Q and Gay, Ellie. I'm ready.
Q and gay.
Here we go. Question number 1. Have you ever been frustrated by having someone else tell your story? A, yes, or B, no?
Yes. A.
Good answer.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll have you you have to fill in the bubble completely for it to count.
We'll put it in the Scantron,
yeah. Question 2. What is your go-to crime show out of A, Criminal Minds, B, Law and Order, C, CSI, or D, Rizzoli and Isles?
None of the above. No.
Because you don't watch them anymore?
Write an answer.
No,
or is there another one?
Now my go-to is Broadchurch.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Secret
Generally
answer
it's
E.
UK. Yeah, secret answer E, Broadchurch.
Nice.
It's okay. The guests get to have secret answers, so
Yeah. E, Broadchurch.
The Twitter poll only gets 4 options.
Yes. All right. Question number 3. What trope are you most tired of? A, barrier gays, B, coming out, or C, 1800s gays?
Oh, A, barrier gays. That's probably a tricky thing for me to say, having just written this book, but
It's not.
It's okay. It's not the same.
It's not. Question 4. Have you ever attended FlameCon? A, not yet. B, yes. C, yes, and I got a t-shirt. Or D, yes, and I did queer cosplay.
C, yes, and I got a t-shirt because I always get a t-shirt.
Amazing.
All right. Question number 5. What would you rather read? A, straight people writing queer stories. B, queer people writing straight stories.
I just want to get the votes on it is all.
Oh, queer people writing B, queer people writing straight stories. Some of my favorite straight stories are by queer people.
No surprise. Which ones? What
I'm trying to
straight
think.
stories are your favorite?
I mean, well,
Something we
Timothy
never thought I'd
Finley-
ask on this podcast.
I mean, Timothy Finley's Not Wanted on the Voyage, which is basically about Noah's Ark. I'm trying to think. Although, you know what? I say that. I haven't read the book recently, so it is entirely possible that there's something I missed the last time I read the book, which was a long time ago, that I wouldn't like now. So Emma Donoghue, who wrote Room, is one of my favorite writers, and Room is one of my favorite books. It's essentially about a straight person, two straight people, or a straight person, and she is gay. And Room is
Very
one of my
cool.
favorite books. There you
I don't
go.
think I knew that. Good to know.
Yeah.
Very
The more
cool.
gays you know.
Yes. And if you
Yes.
haven't read Room, it is like maybe one of the most traumatizing books. I would say even if you've seen the movie, you should read the book because the book is excellent.
Book's usually better than the movie.
Yeah.
Depends, but remember, everyone, you can give us your own answers to this episode's Q&A questions on Twitter at Let's Hang Out Pod. Mariko, thank you so much for hanging out with us and just chatting about all of the things. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
The place that I am most is Instagram, Mariko Tamaki on Instagram. I'm Mariko Tamaki on Twitter too, but I don't really post on Twitter as much. Mostly I'm posting Wordles on Twitter now. That's kind
Nice.
of the only thing I'm posting on Twitter.
That's fair. That's fair.
But yes.
It's the Wordle stage of the pandemic.
It's
so
where I'm
that's
at.
allowed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love them. My friends love them. I like comparing myself to my friends. That's working really well for me right now. Yes. And then do I say the book that's coming out?
Yeah,
and then you can let us
tell
know more,
everyone
yeah.
where they can find Cold. Tell everyone what you have coming up for the imprint or anything else that you want to let people know about.
So Cold is coming out in February from Roaring Brook Press. It's by myself. I also have, you can find comics that I've written at your local comic book store. I think the queerest thing that I've written recently is Crush and Lobo with Amanke Nahulpam. Maybe it's very gay. And then the next Shirley book, which I don't know exactly when it's coming out, but it's coming out this year, is Flung Out of Space, inspired by the indecent adventures of Patricia Highsmith by Grace Ellis and Hannah Templer.
Very cool. Does Flung Out of Space have anything to do with Carol?
Well, it's about Patricia Highsmith, who wrote Carol.
Who wrote The Price of Salt.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Sorry. I was like, I don't know who I'm so sorry.
No,
That
that's
makes
fine.
sense.
Wow,
And
like,
then-
yeah, Ellie, keep up.
I'm like,
Come
yeah,
on.
this is definitely Carol.
It's very, very sexy and funny and interesting, and obviously about an incredibly complicated person. I think a really amazing look at an artist's life, because it's really about the sort of writer behind romantic stories and the kind of disconnect between sort of what you can create and what that means to a community as a writer, and like the potential mismatch of like who you are as a person. Like if whoever you are as a person is kind of a terrible person, but you make these things that like mean the world to a community, like what that means. So yes, because
Very cool.
Patricia Highsmith was kind of horrible, but made Carol. So
God damn it.
yeah.
So conflicted.
Yeah, no, and
So
I think
much
that
conflict.
It's a really great book because it really kind of it looks at a lot of things, but I think it's important to look at the people in our community that we kind of want to hold up, and the people that we maybe don't want to hold up as sort of part of our history, because our history includes lots of people like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. It's coming out soon.
Very, very cool. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know people are going to love reading Cold and all of the other stuff that you've got going on. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yay!
Let's do this again sometime.
Yes.
I'm not the first
I
person
love
to
it.
say that. There's no way.
It's amazing.
Let me hear you say hip, 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 well, yeah.
We love hearing from all of you, and we love continuing to build this community, so we just like to shout out some of our favorite things every episode. And this week, we want to shout out one of our listeners, Elizabeth, who sent us a message, very excited about our Devil Wears Prada episode, which, how can we blame you?
We knew you would not be disappointed.
Listen.
I'm disappointed I couldn't be there for it, but
I'm disappointed too, Ellie. I missed you.
I'm very happy that I got to listen to it.
But we know people had been waiting for a long time, and so we're glad people enjoyed the episode. Also, letting us know that Doug isn't supposed to be Lily's boyfriend and was queer-coded on purpose. So that I found fascinating because I did not get that at all when I watched the movie.
You know what?
So
I actually think I did know that, but I wasn't there.
I have learned something
I wasn't
today.
there to tell you during the episode. So
I know.
I also
we missed you.
on the note of Devil Wears Prada, because it has been getting us so much engagement because of course people love this movie as a gay movie. Sappho Goes to the Movies on Instagram also posted about it with some fan art by Angel March Art of Andy and Miranda together. And it's
incredible.
Some great fan art, and they tagged us in it, of course. And we're like, yes, Devil Wears Prada should have been gay. So thank you to everyone who's been reaching out about one of our favorite ships ever and most toxic.
And as always, we want to thank our Lesbian Jesus patrons, Mark Foster,
Jess Klaus,
Tanya Ferguson,
Jacqueline Rosashino,
Sarah and Julia,
Danny Gunlock Tamora,
Brittany Ray,
Alana Rosen,
Lizette Stye,
Stacy,
Adi Benitez,
Fiona W.,
Whitney Lennon,
and Jennifer Trujillo.
And our King Princess patrons, Amy and Ellen,
Leah Henley,
Liz Chen,
Julia Gonzalez,
and Ashley White. Thank you, all of our patrons. You know how much we love all of you. We could not keep doing this show without you, and you're all just the best, and you're fun people. That's all.
The best. Remember, you can also find us on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Let's Hang Out Pod.
You can email us at letshangoutpod@gmail.com.
Or check out our website at letshangoutpod.com.
Whatever app you use to listen to podcasts, make sure that you subscribe. That way you'll get new episodes as soon as they go up every week.
Also, make sure you subscribe to the Flame RSS feed on any podcasting app if you have not listened to the Flame yet.
And reminder, we have new videos going up on our YouTube channel, so make sure that you subscribe at youtube.com/letshangoutpod to catch all of those.
One of the easiest ways to support the podcast is to rate and review us on iTunes. We love hearing what you have to say.
If you want to support us financially, you can join our Patreon at bit.ly/lespatreon. You get all sorts of fun stuff. You get ad-free episodes. You get access to our Les Essentials watch parties. We have our next one coming up soon. We're going to be watching some Dickinson together.
Can't wait.
So don't miss out on that. Again, it's bit.ly/lespatreon.
If you want to support our musicals, we are going to be changing our Patreon for The Flame to be a more all-encompassing musical Patreon, but you can join that at bit.ly/theflamepatreon. It'll help us make our new musical, Journey to the Heart, and also help us get the Flame on stage.
If you want to check out our merch, we have all of our designs for Let's Hang Out and for The Flame, and we'll have all of our designs for our next musical up here as well. At our TeePublic, you can find it at bit.ly/lesshop. You get any of our designs on all sorts of products and also help support us.
If you want to find us individually, you can find me at Ellie Brigida on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at LSH Foster.
With that, I'm Ellie.
And I'm Lee.
And
let's hang out again soon.
Let's hang out.
Buffet brawlers, glory holes gone wrong, cannibalistic castration cabins, public poopers? These are just a few of the crazy topics you'll hear covered on Excuse Me, That's Illegal, the pettiest podcast around. Whether you need a break from all that murdery true crime stuff, or just enjoy hearing hilarious stories told in a unique way, I got what you need. I'm Leroy Luna, your fearless host/chauffeur. So come hop in my minivan and let's go for a ride. I promise you probably won't be disappointed. Excuse Me, That's Illegal is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically everywhere you consume podcasts, with new episodes dropping on the 10th, 20th, and 30th of the month, baby!